Thank you for joining me this afternoon. It's good to see Eddie again, and I'm glad to be joined by Dr. Cheryl May of the Criminal Justice Institute, but also Chairman of the School Safety Commission, which is a topic of the conversation this afternoon, and also by Secretary Johnny Key, who is helping to prepare students to go back to school this year. We want to do that in a safe fashion. Before I get to the topic of the School Safety Commission interim report, I did want to mention that we had the revenue report for the month of July come out today, and it was good news. It shows that our net revenues were $26.6 million above the forecast for the month of July. It is a good start to this year, and it reflects the continued strength of the Arkansas economy, and it also reinforces the need to lower our tax cuts that's planned, to lower our tax rates that is planned in the special session next week. Now let me move to the School Safety Commission report. As you know, yesterday we received the interim report from the School Safety Commission. I want to thank Dr. May and the entire commission for their extraordinary work. I think they've had 6 meetings just of the commission itself, and then they've had also their subcommittees meeting. This is a comprehensive interim report that I'll be referencing and going through some of this, but Dr. May, thank you for your extraordinary leadership in putting this together and the comprehensive work in short fashion. And let me go back, though, and just put this in historical context. In 2018, our nation experienced a school shooting at the Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. This, again, ripped the heart out of a nation, and while we didn't have the incident here in Arkansas, I created the School Safety Commission to review our schools, our laws, and to make recommendations to keep our children safe. The recommendations that came out of that School Safety Commission did not sit on a shelf, and most of those recommendations have been adopted, and they have made a real difference in the safety of our schools. I signed into law 4 bills that were carried by Senator Missy Irvin and by Representative Bruce Cozart. These acts that I signed into law mandated school safety assessments every 3 years, mandated school climate and cultural assessments be done as well. It required school counselors to receive additional training in youth mental health. It required the districts with school resource officers to implement a model MOU between the school and the police agency that provided the school resource officer to make sure that they had a written understanding of responsibilities. Recommended more comprehensive training of our SROs, and it identified the Arkansas Center for School Safety at the Criminal Justice Institute, led by Dr. May, as the primary state resource for school safety. We also, which I was very happy to do and necessary to do, we passed and I signed into law Act 190 of 2019 that required 90% of school counselor time to be devoted to direct counseling of the students. So it took some of the administrative burden off. We wanted to make sure counselors address the mental health needs of their students. As a result of these steps, as I said, it's made a difference. The SROs in the school districts have increased from 315 in 2018 to 460 this year. It also made a difference in our facilities partnership program that funds with state dollars our school facilities, where it could include campus safety and security projects as eligible for state funding. That was an important change that was made. We've had 611 school resource officers that have been trained in youth mental health issues. And you think about an SRO that might be working the streets, might be a patrol officer brought in to work in the school environment. they need to have that specialized training. And so those are some of the steps that have been taken, some of the progress and the results of it. But there's been a recent national event, of course, that required us to look at this issue again, and that was the Robb Elementary shooting in Uvalde, Texas. It served as a reminder that the threat of violence in our schools has not abated. It continues to be real, and that we have to act with a renewed sense of urgency to protect our children. For that reason, I reconvened the School Safety Commission. Dr. May has led that, as I've mentioned. I asked for a second review and updated recommendations. There's 24 members of the commission. They've worked extraordinarily hard, and I want to thank all of them for their work and the tireless efforts they've put into place. I'll just mention a few of the findings and recommendations coming out of the preliminary report. First of all, they've recommended expanding youth mental health training, not just to school counselors and school resource officers, but to all personnel who interact with students. All of the personnel have responsibilities. That's a recommendation. Secondly, finding that all school districts should establish a behavioral threat assessment team with proper training and proper allocation of resources to that threat assessment team. This was previously recommended. Now they're recommending that it be required for every school district. They found that all students should have access to mental health services, whether in person or via telehealth. And this is a very important recommendation because presently access to mental health services for our students is inconsistent across our schools in Arkansas. The school is often the only resource for telehealth, for mental health services that can be provided to a student. They're trained to identify a mental health issue. We need to have the resources to provide that through our schools. One of the recommendations, which is very important coming out of the Uvalde tragedy, and that is we have to increase audits, drills, and compliance efforts through the appointment of a school safety coordinator on each campus. And the responsibility of that coordinator, of course, would be to assure that there is a culture of compliance, that they're all working in the same direction to keep the children safe and to make sure that the models that's being prepared and the training that is being carried out is actually put into practice. And then the recommendation or finding is that every campus should have an armed presence at all times. This can be through SROs, it could be through other licensed professionals that would be armed. And so there's multiple different ways that can be done. There's flexibility, but that is a clear recommendation. And finally, they recommend that we change the state law to say all doors and exits must remain locked during school hours. Presently, the law requires the doors and exits to remain unlocked. This is a remnant of the old fire code that we have in Arkansas that needs to be updated. Many of these recommendations will take, one, it takes money, and secondly, it will take legal changes, law changes that can be considered next January. Let me emphasize that these recommendations require an investment of real dollars by local school districts. Today, the report makes the need clear for a $50 million school safety grant program that I will be putting on the agenda of the special session that is set for next week. That $50 million will be a good start, a good support mechanism for our school districts as they try to carry out the responsibility that school children must be safe. The General Assembly will set the parameters of this grant program, but I expect broad support and that it can be used to meet the recommendations of the School Safety Commission report. With that, let me recognize the chairperson of the committee. I want to thank you, Cheryl, for your very hard work in preparing this Safety Commission report, and we look forward to carrying it out and keeping our children safe. Dr. May.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. As the governor stated, the primary purpose of what we tried to do in this report is to give an update on where the schools are with respect to fulfilling the recommendations of the original commission. And I think based on the comprehensive nature of this report that you all are going to agree that we've made a tremendous amount of progress. I want to thank the original commission for all of their hard work, but I also want to thank the superintendents and their staff. We can make recommendations all day long, but unless they feel that these are important, valuable recommendations and take the time and effort to implement them, our kids would not be as safe as they are. We would not be here today if it weren't for, I didn't know what side you were standing on, you tricked me. Where we are today if it weren't for our champion, Governor Hutchinson. I've had the opportunity to work with him for many years on this issue, and I am tremendously grateful for everything that you have done to make our kids so much safer. I want to thank Secretary Key, who has been him and his staff have been a tremendously valuable partner in all of this, and Secretary, thank you. It does definitely have great benefits. As the governor mentioned, we have made a tremendous amount of progress in a short period of time. And that was not just done by me. That was done by the incredible 24 School Safety Commission members that we have. We've met once a week over every 6 weeks. They had 2 and sometimes 3-hour subcommittee meetings every week. I can't thank them enough for their dedication and commitment to school safety. They were also helped by what we call subject matter experts, and I want to thank all of them as well. There have been many staff, not only at DESE and Angela in particular, and Beth in my shop at CJI, that has allowed this to come forward and to fruition, at least for our interim report. But there are a couple of things in here that I want to really emphasize. Just like in the original 2018 final commission report, we stress the importance of implementing comprehensive strategies, that we make the very, very strong argument that there's not one single thing that a school can do that's going to make that school safe, that it has to be a combination of a variety of things, and actually a variety of things that represent all of our 5 subcommittees. But there's also the importance of layering. You know, we can look at Uvalde and we can say, okay, there was a problem with the exterior door locking. Well, in theory, if the interior doors had been okay, that would have been another barrier that had to have been gone around. Or if there had been an SRO that had been there, the fact that the door wasn't locked might not have been an issue at all. So being able to have this layering is critically important. But I think the other lesson that Uvalde does teach us, and the governor very astutely mentions this, is the fact that there has to be accountability. Accountability is critically important in all of this, not only at the state level, the district level, the school level, but also at the staff level. Uvalde, the report that was done by the legislative committee, is extremely valuable to us because we can't learn from these kind of instances without open and honest dialogue and reports like that. So through that, it was very clear that the Robb Elementary School had a culture of noncompliance. We can't allow that to happen in our schools, so that accountability is so important. The other thing that I want to mention too is prevention. Prevention is so incredibly important in everything that we do. The National Threat Assessment Center, that are, the Secret Service, they basically came out with 2 reports, one in 2019 and one in 2021. And one of them looked at the attackers. There were successful attacks. I think there were 41 of them. And the other one looked at averted plots. And there were, I think, 67. And basically what they found is that within these 2 groups and these individuals, they found a number of things. That they typically were grieved and badly bullied. in some way, not only online but also in person, that there was a history of law enforcement in school, law enforcement involvement or interaction in school discipline. They had mental health issues, and the one thing that is very striking to me is also the fact that they were impacted by negative factors at home. So we collectively, and that includes things such as parental substance abuse, domestic violence, child abuse, parental incarceration. I want to applaud all the schools for all the incredible work that they've done to date, but we also have some work to do. So thank you. Secretary Key.
Thank you, Dr. May. Thank you, Governor. You know, in state government and government in general, too often we see a lot of effort go into making reports and doing studies, and those studies and reports get left on a shelf and really don't get reviewed again. Under Governor Hutchinson's term, he has really encouraged us, and as cabinet secretaries, as leaders within his agencies, to not allow that to happen. And I'm happy to say that this report today is an example of work that was done several years ago, has really been a lot of steps that have been completed, recommendations that have been actually fulfilled. And the commission this time really helped show the governor's foresight from 2018 in that they confirmed the recommendations from the previous report, and now we're able to strengthen those instead of having to come up with a blank slate of new recommendations. A couple of the recommendations that I want to point to as we look forward in how we design and build schools in Arkansas is the addition of Section 8000 into our rules governing the construction and design of school facilities. That's something that is fairly new, but now under the partnership program, schools have to look at that section and include that in their design work. Also, the fact that previously under the partnership program, the funding was not available for those types of projects for upgrades to physical security, and that is something that we changed in the 19 session and has been part of our funding cycles now for a couple of cycles. So just to point to those two examples that we deal with on a very regular basis. We are appreciative of the partnership as well. It really has strengthened over the last 4 years. We look forward to strengthening that in an ongoing way and working with the legislature to see which of these recommendations do require legislation, how that legislation will have to be funded through the next steps as we enter the next session. But we look forward to doing that and completing this work, making sure we are vigilant in an ongoing way to make sure Arkansas schools are as safe as they possibly can be for our students. Governor.
With that, be happy to take any questions.
Governor, the $50 million program that you're proposing, can you kind of walk through how do you envision that operating in terms of how it's divided, what it goes toward, the timeline, and separately, the federal bipartisan gun law, the funding that's opened up by that, does any of that, do you see that helping in any of the areas that are recommended in this report?
First, in reference to the specifics on how this $50 million would be applied, this will be very similar to how we worked the law enforcement training grant program, where we set aside funding from our surplus for one-time grants for local law enforcement agencies that they could apply for. The legislature sets aside $50 million for this grant program. And then the Department of Education, working with Dr. May, would come up with a set of rules that they would go and specifics on the grant program back to ALC for approval on that. And so there's still work to be done on the specifics of it. You know, in my broad discussions with the legislature, I think the intent is that this could be used for upgrades in security, access, cameras, or specific recommendations that come out of the School Safety Commission report that we just recited. But that will be dependent upon the rules that will be adopted before the money could actually be released.
This question might be for Dr. May, or you can take it. Now, a big focus of the committee, I know, was making sure this would be accessible for all schools. Some schools might have older locks that they'll need to change all of, and that could be more expensive, or they'll need more mental health staffing, things like that. How is this still going to be accessible for those schools, and what's the timeline going to look like? Maybe some schools need to put more, to do more changes than others.
I'll let you.
You've got this.
Probably Johnny's got a good one. One secretary, why don't you take that one?
All right, I'll take a stab at that one. Dr. May referred to a layered approach. So $50 million obviously won't cover all of the layers, all of the needs, but from a district-to-district situation, it will address some of those layers. So as you pointed out so accurately, we have rural districts, smaller districts that may not have the upgraded locks because they may not have had new construction over the last few years. That is something that we anticipate could be allowable under this program. But on the other hand, you may have a district that has a new building that may need some other component of this, another layer. So we anticipate that there would be flexibility in this process. Timing-wise, but we certainly hope to get this out as soon as possible to coincide with the beginning of school. I mean, some of these things could be quick turnaround topics, quick turnaround projects. Some of them could be a little longer. I anticipate that the General Assembly will also be looking at ongoing needs for staffing. In my conversations with some of the members, that's something they have highlighted, but we're certainly open to provide them with whatever support that they need, information they need as they go through those deliberations.
And as far as talking about keeping armed presence on campus, does that include teachers? I know you said it could be different persons.
We've already passed a law in Arkansas that allows school personnel with training to be an armed presence in the school. And so there are certain school districts that already have that capability. It requires training. It's not mandated that teachers or anyone go through that training. It's voluntary, but it is an option for school districts that choose to do that. And I didn't answer part of your question, which is on the federal dollars. And the federal dollars that come in is just another resource that schools can use to beef up security. And so a lot will depend upon the restrictions of those federal dollars, but that's another resource for them. And this will be supplementary to that.
So is the aim to do rules by the year, or?
As quick as possible. I mean, obviously, we want to be able to impact safety for the schools as the children go back to school this fall. We're going to be meeting next week in special session. If this is adopted by the General Assembly, I've directed Secretary Key to get those rules in motion, and they've got to go back for approval through the legislature. So it's just a question as to how quickly that can move, and we reach agreement on that.
Are there any specific recommendations that you're hoping to get before the school year? I know there's only a few weeks, but you said that there might be some. Are there any specific ones you see being possible that fast?
Well, some of the recommendations can be handled simply by the investment of money, whether it might be electronic access controls. There doesn't have to be any change in legislation to accomplish that. It's just a question of resources. And so those could be done immediately. I expect every principal and superintendent to be reading this interim report, make a determination what they can do, what they need more resources on, but I expect that to move quickly for this fall. There's others that will require a change in law. That would be next January if the legislature addressed some of those recommendations through the legislative process, but that would be next January.
What happens between now and the final report?
Well, more work. I actually asked Dr. May about this, and the final report is due in October, and so they're going to continue to meet. They're going to continue to finalize these recommendations, but also there might be additional findings that they want to make. Did you have anything to add to that?
No.
I know for a while there's been a lot of talk about having an anonymous reporting system in schools. Is this going to be part of that $50 million, or is it going to be something?
This would be like a tip line, And that is discussed in the report. And that's important that we have the capability for anonymous reporting and information that can be followed up, and that would be assigned to the threat assessment group that would look at it from a mental health standpoint, whether it's real, what the response should be. Dr. May, you better
Yes, sir,
supplement that.
I'll do that. Yeah, one of the things that we're looking at is rather than have each school district set up their own anonymous or confidential tip line, it's to be able to develop a statewide anonymous or confidential tip line. And in this report, we talk about the formation of a committee that's going to, we've done a lot of research. I've spoken to a lot of different states and the models that they've used, but we want to be able to use the model that's going to fit best for not only our schools, but our kids.
Last week you talked about wanting to hear from parents too about their convictions. Is that still the case, and how is that?
Yeah, we're trying to find some parents that are willing to come forward and speak with us. I mean, you know, the three, and I call them kids. You know, they're not kids. They're high school students. They're on the verge of becoming young adults. Were just absolutely phenomenal. Nanambi and Mary and Webb just blew all of our socks off. And it makes me feel, oh my goodness, what a tremendous future we have ahead of us in this state because of how wonderful they are. But they were also very honest and open with us. And I think as a group, we greatly appreciated their candor.
Governor, you mentioned the importance of every student having access to mental health, whether it be in person or telehealth. I know that some of the kids, high school students that made an appearance at the last month's meeting, they mentioned the importance of mental health, and some of them said that there weren't enough counselors to go around for all the students. So how do you plan to accomplish that mission of making sure that every student has access to mental health if there's not enough people to listen?
That's a great question, and it's a challenge that remains to be addressed. When I mentioned we have school counselors, one, as you said, we don't have enough school counselors. And then sometimes their training is not specific enough, even though we will supplement their training with youth mental health issues. Their background might be more in career support. And so there is a need to enhance the counseling capability in our schools and the mental health treatment. Some of this has to be done through telemedicine. Some of it has to be done through enhancing the resources of the school itself. And so that's a longer-term challenge. This is a start here, but you know, that's going to have to be evaluated by the Adequacy Committee of the General Assembly, which will make recommendations on what exactly is needed in terms of state funding for those kind of resources, balanced with what the local school district's responsibility would be.
And I understand this might be a more specific question, but there are different demographics within the school district. Thinking about, in particular, in the Hispanic community, people who are ESL, they don't necessarily speak the language. How do you plan to reach out to those students who do go to school every day and who deserve the same type of education and mental health resources as any other students?
I think the school districts are actually doing a very good job on that. I think about Springdale School District. I think about the DeQueen School District, and you know, they have services that are available for minorities across the board, particularly the Hispanics. And so I think there is the support for that. If there's gaps in that, we need to look at it, because they certainly need these services, and we want to make sure they're available.
What is your response to some parents and teachers that are saying, you know, maybe metal detectors or some of the bigger security measures are making them nervous for school, making it look more restricted? Some are even saying they're making it scared that their children are going to a prison-like school. What kind of response is the safety balance with the visual aspect?
Well, those are decisions that are made by local school boards as to the level of security that's needed. We're not making recommendations here in the school commission report for magnetometers as students go into the classroom. But if a school district decided that was necessary, or they had a particular threat, then hats off to them for taking the necessary steps. So they have to, school boards listen to parents, they gauge the the toleration of the community for what is the necessary safety in the schools. What I've been impressed with young people, though, is that everybody said, well, that will be terrifying for young people to see an armed police officer in the schools. Well, it's just the opposite. I mean, it's built relationships. They've been a great part of the school team and resource team, and so it's been beneficial. And so students are very resilient, and they understand the need for safety, and I think it gives them confidence. But it is a decision of the local school district. Anybody else have anything on that?
Yeah, I think part of that layering approach really has to look at a district's own risk. And there are issues that some districts deal with that other districts do not. So we certainly don't say there's a blanket approach to dealing with those things. But I also have been in schools where once students get accustomed to the new procedures, new equipment, then it becomes less of an issue on a day-to-day basis. Governor, if I may, I would like to address the mental health question. We at the department have been using some of our state ESSER funds that we were allowed to set aside for statewide projects to launch the Thrive Academy. And under the Thrive Academy, it really is bringing in principals, educators, bringing them from all over the state to help provide them support, to provide behavioral and mental health supports, techniques, resources that they can take back to their districts and use to support the students that they have. Something else I think is very important with telehealth and especially telemental health. When the governor took office, we did not have the high-speed broadband that we needed to do that type of work. And now every district in the state is connected through DIS and through ADE to high-speed broadband, and work to continue to elevate and improve that service is ongoing in partnership with DIS. So we have some infrastructure in place now that can be used that wasn't there just a few years ago.
Let's take one final question, and let me see first if there's anybody remotely that has a question.
Brett Raines, Sporting 29 News. Quick question: when it comes to armed presence in schools, should that simply be a recommendation up and left up to each and every school district, or should that be mandated by state legislation?
That's a good question. It's fair. I believe it's a finding that the commission has made with a recommendation that every school should have an armed presence there. It's obviously one, the legislature could mandate it. I think that is ultimately a resource issue. I mean, we're recommending SROs to be in every school or an armed presence. As to whether that's mandated would be a legislative question as to whether they wanted to go that far or not, but that is the recommendation. I think we had two more. Did I see two questions here? We'll do one there and one here. Okay, we'll finish. Did you have one, sir? You're good? Yes, ma'am. And then we'll come here and we're done.
Okay, so my final question would be, what kind of message do you have for parents? Obviously, it's not just the school, the preschool, and the child's development. What kind of message do you have for them, and what kind of role do they play in this entire scenario?
Parents?
Parents.
Well, they play a critical role in this scenario. Their voice is important because no one cares more about the children's safety than they do. And so if they, have some ideas on how to enhance safety, then they need to communicate that to their school board. They need to communicate it to their teachers and principals and also to the commission. And so they ultimately have the voice in it. But the one fundamental point I hear from parents is we want our children safe in the schools. And so that's the mandate that we have that we're trying to accomplish. Yes, ma'am.
First, I'm just wondering if people are able to access the school report online or anywhere. And then second, while we're here before we leave, just wanted to ask, the federal government declared more counties federal disaster areas today because of drought. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on the importance of that.
Well, I actually asked Secretary Vilsack to declare the entire state a drought disaster area. Last week, they declared 4 counties with the contiguous counties providing relief. This week, they've added, as you said, 20-some more counties, so I'm very pleased with this designation, and that means access to federal dollars for the damage because of the drought. We do hope that that will even be extended further because the entire state has been damaged in terms of crop and the outcomes of the drought. And I would add, too, that we have been blessed with some rain the last few days, but it remains really in drought conditions, and so the request remains the same. And then, Dr. May, will this be available online, this
Yes,
report?
sir. It'd be on the,
It'll be on the Department of Education. It will be available. We'll make sure of that, and we want you to have access to it, as well as the public. Thank you all for your attention to this important matter, and we look forward to continued success of the Commission in the future. Thank you.